Good morning. Please take your seats. I call the meeting of the General Committee on Political Affairs and Security to order. This will be our final meeting of the annual session. The agenda for the meeting has been distributed. Could I please invite you to adopt the agenda? Are there any objections? Without objection, the agenda is adopted. I hope we'll be able to make good progress as we have in previous days. Today we have supplementary items and amendments to these items. We must close our meeting by 11 and have elections also before 11 a.m. Any supplementary items that we do not have time to consider will be referred to the plenary session this afternoon. As this is the final meeting, we will hold elections for committee officials, as I stated. The deadline for nominations for committee officials was some 1.5 minutes ago and has now passed. It's my information that one nomination has been received for the post of chair, Mr. Roger Wicker of the United States. 2 nominations have been received for the post of vice chair, Mr. Stefan Cruznieri of Belgium and Mr. Guglielmo Picci of Italy. 1 nomination has been received for the post of rapporteur, Ms. Sederfeld of Sweden. We will return to the election at the close of the meeting. We now move to the consideration of supplementary items. The committee has been tasked by the Standing Committee to debate and consider 6 supplementary items. We will take these items in order as set out in the agenda. You will recall that at the end of yesterday's meeting, we closed the register of speakers for the general debate on these supplementary draft resolutions. It was necessary to do that in the interest of time. We begin with the draft resolution on possible contributions of the OSCE Parliamentary Assembly to developing effective response to crisis and conflicts. 9 amendments have been tabled to this draft resolution. I now call on Ms. Barnett of Germany to introduce the draft resolution. And Mr. Timekeeper, could you place 3 minutes on the clock? Ms. Barnett, you have the floor.
Vielen Dank, Herr Präsident, und guten Morgen, liebe Kolleginnen und Kollegen. Wir haben jetzt seit 40 Jahren die OSZE und seit 25 Jahren einen parlamentarischen Körper zur OSZE, die Parlamentarische Versammlung. Ich verstehe uns so, dass wir über viele Resolutionen und Treffen es verstanden haben, als Parlamentarier die Arbeit des Zusammenwachsens unserer Staatengemeinschaft voranzutreiben. Wir haben gute Resolutionen gemacht und auch gute Fortschritte erzielt in einer vernünftigen Zusammenarbeit miteinander. Und es wäre an der Zeit, dass wir über unsere Parlamentarische Versammlung es erreichen, die Zusammenarbeit unserer Länder, wenn wir noch so große Unterschiede haben und so große Missverständnisse und Krisen, erleichtern. Denn wir sind da für unsere Menschen. Natürlich machen wir Politik, aber wir machen in allererster Linie Politik, um es den Menschen in unseren Ländern zu erleichtern. Auch zu erleichtern, wieder zu ihren Verwandten zu kommen, über Grenzen, die für immer geschlossen schienen, hinwegzukommen. Und deswegen ist es wichtig, dass wir unsere Resolutionen und auch unsere Aufgabe, die wir uns selbst gestellt haben, ernst nehmen. Deswegen schlagen wir dann auch, oder schlage ich mit meinem weiteren Antrag vor, dass wir zum Beispiel über das Sekretariat, OSZE-Sekretariat und über unsere Parlamentarische Versammlung selbst weitere Erfolge erreichen können, indem wir zum Beispiel mit Seminaren Streitparteien zusammenbringen und dort versuchen, Annäherungen zu erreichen. Ich glaube nicht, dass wir die großen Konflikte mit 2 Sitzungen erledigen können. Aber ich weiß sehr wohl, dass wir allen guten Willens sind und dass wir deswegen zur Überwindung der Konfrontationen beitragen können und möchte Sie alle bitten, diese Resolution zu unterstützen, in unser aller Interesse. Herzlichen Dank.
Thank you, Ms. Barnett. The floor is now open for debate. The time limit for speeches on general debate is 3 minutes, and we have 2 members who have registered their interest in speaking in this debate. I call Mr. Gagamayan of Armenia. Sir, you have the floor for 3 minutes.
Уважаемые коллеги, этот вопрос представляет собой исключительную важность, потому что мы сейчас переживаем трудные дни, когда в ареале ОБСЕ в разных точках все еще есть затянувшиеся конфликты. Вклад парламентской ассамблеи ОБСЕ в разработку эффективных мер трудно переоценить. Достаточно сказать, что если бы парламентарии ОБСЕ собственно, были бы гостями в Нагорно-Карабахской республике, в Крыму, в Приднестровье, в других точках в ареале ОБСЕ, где есть затянувшиеся конфликты, наши сегодняшние обсуждения проходили бы совершенно в ином русле. Вчера, выступавший здесь мой коллега из Азербайджана, пролил свет на очень многие факторы. Достаточно сказать то, что когда была предложена поправка с осуждением эскалации насилия в зоне Нагорно-Карабахского конфликта, насилие, которое привело к гибели по разным оценкам от 500 до 900 воинов и мирных жителей с обеих сторон, выступили против этой поправки, против осуждения эскалации насилия, тем самым фактически признали, что за эскалацией насилия стоят они сами. Другой немаловажный вопрос. Вчера, когда в проект резолюции предложен нашим коллегой госпожой Фрай, была особо подчеркнута необходимость уделения особого внимания женщинам, которые проживают в зонах затяжных конфликтов. И против этой поправки тоже выступили наши азербайджанские коллеги, тем самым сказав, что если затяжной конфликт, то женщины, мужчины, пропади там пропадом, пока этот конфликт не разрешится. Почему я эти примеры привел? Эти примеры со всей убедительностью показывают, что парламентская ассамблея ОБСЕ должна принимать личное участие в объективном рассмотрении ситуации, которая складывается в каждой из зон затяжных конфликтов. И только после этого мы сможем дать объективную оценку. Иначе все это подходит на старые добрые времена, когда все осуждали в бывшем Советском Союзе Бориса Пастернака за его роман «Доктор Живаго». И когда спрашивали, зачем вы осуждаете, они говорили, осуждаем. А на вопрос, читали вы этот роман, говорили, нет, не читали, но осуждаем. Точно так же и сейчас, не видя на месте положения дел, осуждают. Спасибо.
Thank you, Mr. Gagamayan. I now recognize Mr. Salizoda of Tajikistan. Sir, you have the floor for 3 minutes.
Спасибо, уважаемый господин председатель. Вопрос о содействии Афганистану, миростроительстве, выходе из состояния постоянной военной угрозы, борьбе с наркопреступностью является актуальным вопросом международного сотрудничества. Предстоящий вывод войск международной коалиции из Афганистана усиливает эти вызовы и требует адекватного ответа. Таджикистан, как и другие члены парламентской ассамблеи ОБСЕ, кровно заинтересован в достижении мира и согласия в соседней стране. Мы все хотим видеть Афганистан экономически самостоятельной и нейтральной страной, свободной от угрозы войны, и выражаем удовлетворение по поводу усилий международного сообщества, нацеленных на установление мира, стабильности и безопасности в Афганистане. И к этому неустанно призывает Таджикистан с высоких международных трибун. Несмотря на наследие длительного политического кризиса и наличие разношерстных экстремистских сил, внутренний потенциал Афганистана велик. Существуют реальные возможности расширения и укрепления социальной и национальной этнической базы политической власти через широкое использование традиционных институтов и норм, активизацию деятельности интеллигенции мусульманских богословов, молодежи и средств массовой информации, конструктивного диалога всех слоев гражданского общества. И здесь необходимо опираться на древние обычаи, богатую культуру, древнюю дипломатию и восточную мудрость, конечно. Следует отметить, что политические и социальные процессы последних лет, особенно активизация террористических и экстремистских группировок, вновь ввергают Афганистан в пучину дестабилизации, приводят к усилению террористической и наркотической угроз, исходящей из этой многострадальной страны. В контексте сказано, существенную помощь в антитеррористической деятельности могут и призваны оказать парламентские ассамблеи ОБСЕ, парламент и другие межпарламентские организации. Возможность пересечения любых форм насилия должна быть предусмотрена прежде всего в законодательстве. Мы верим в будущее народа Афганистана и как член международного сообщества готовы внести свою достойную лепту в решение насущных проблем нашего ближайшего соседа. Мы хотим, чтобы в Центральноазиатском регионе, как и на всем земном шаре, царили мир, спокойствие и взаимопонимание. Спасибо за внимание.
Thank you very much. That now concludes debate on the draft resolution. We will move to consideration of the amendments submitted to the draft resolution. 9 amendments have been tabled, and copies of the amendments have been made available. The correct version of the draft resolution is SC 16 SI2. The correct version of the amendments is entitled AS 16 SI2 Amend. As I've said over the previous meeting, the chair will continue to impose strict limits on speaking time, and members have been so cooperative in that regard. There will be a maximum of 1 minute each for the proposer of an amendment, for the opponent, and then for the sponsor of the draft resolution, in this case, Ms. Barnett. Following that, the chair will put the amendment to the vote, and once again, we will provide numbers for the votes that are close. With regard to oral amendments, the same rules will apply as have applied throughout our sessions. I now call on Mr. Kovalev from the Russian Federation to propose amendment number 1. Sir, you are recognized for 1 minute.
Спасибо, господин председатель. Уважаемые коллеги, нам представляется, что очень важно подчеркнуть, что все парламенты, национальные парламенты, я бы даже сказал, не только большинство, а все национальные парламенты поддерживают деятельность ОБСЕ по мирному урегулированию споров в регионах, где бы это ни было. В том числе и, конечно, вот по той резолюции, которую мы сейчас обсуждаем, хотелось бы это особо подчеркнуть. Поэтому я прошу эту поправку принять и поддержать ее. Мне представляется, что это разумно и абсолютно объективно. Спасибо.
Thank you. Would anyone seek to be recognized in opposition to the amendment? Seeing none, Ms. Barnett, what is your view on the amendment?
Ich bin für diese Ergänzung.
Thank you, Ms. Barnett. We'll now move to a vote on the amendment. All in favor of the amendment, please raise your voting cards. And cards down. Those opposed, please raise your voting cards. And there appears to be no opposition. Abstentions? Thank you. Cards down. And it is clear amendment number 1 is adopted. Amendments 2 and 3 relate to text in paragraph 10, which regards the role of the OSCE EPA's special representative in Vienna. The chair will therefore group the amendments together for discussion as allowed under Rule 22.7 of the Rules of Procedure. I call on Mr. Gagamayan from Armenia to propose amendment number 2. Sir, you're recognized for 60 seconds.
Эта поправка носит редакционный и несколько расширительный вариант. Просьба заменить слова таких неофициальных словами других соответствующих, потому что кроме неофициальных есть официальные, есть гражданские и ряд других организаций, которым не чужды вопросы, освещаемые в данной поправке. И в конце пункта снять слова как группы друзей, потому что кроме группы друзей есть и другие группы заинтересованных организаций, людей, которые также стремятся в этом вопросе навести порядок. Спасибо.
Thank you. I now call on Mr. Slutsky from the Russian Federation to propose amendment number 3.
Спасибо, господин председатель. Морозов вместо Слуцкого. Несмотря на то, что это пункт 10, последний констатирует части резолюции и выражает в большей степени такой эмоциональный характер, мы все-таки хотели бы его сделать более предметным и конкретным. Поэтому наша поправка, она несколько корректирует сам вот этот пункт и заключается в том, что мы хотим, выражая удовлетворение по поводу участия специального представителя парламентской ассамблеи ОБСЕ в Вене, в выработке эффективных мер ОБСЕ по реагированию на кризисы и конфликты. Спасибо.
Thank you. It is now time to recognize any members who wish to speak against either Amendment 2 or 3. Who would seek recognition to speak against Amendment 2? Seeing no one, who would seek recognition to speak against Amendment 3? Ms. Barnett, what is your view on Amendments 2 and 3?
Beide wollen Ähnliches, aber im Prinzip würde ich jetzt hier wirklich vorschlagen, dass wir bei dem ursprünglichen Text bleiben und lehne beide ab, weil die kommen sich ja auch miteinander ins Gehege.
Thank you, and we will soon vote. And please note that if Amendment 2 is adopted, Amendment 3 will be preempted and will not be put to the vote. Will all of those in favor of Amendment 2 please raise their voting cards? Thank you. Thank you. Cards down. Those opposed, please raise your voting cards. And it is clear. Thank you. Abstentions on Amendment 2. Thank you. And Amendment 2 is not agreed to. We will now vote on Amendment 3. Will all of those in favor of Amendment 3 please raise your voting cards? Thank you. Cards down. Those opposed to Amendment 3, raise your voting cards. And the margin is clear. You may put your cards down. Who wishes to abstain? Thank you. And Amendment 3 is defeated. I now call on Mr. Gagamayan of Armenia to propose Amendment 4.
Поправка преследует одну единственную цель. Затяжными конфликтами, в частности Нагорно-Карабахским, вот уже 2 десятилетия занимается специализированная Минская группа ОБСЕ под председательством Соединенных Штатов, России и Франции. Они достаточно профессионально уже вникли в суть проблемы. И очень важно, чтобы все новые форматы, преследующие благие цели разрешения этого конфликта, были бы в помощь сопредседателям Минской группы ОБСЕ. Иначе, на первый взгляд, их объективное стремление выявить истину приводит к плачевным последствиям, потому что они не знают историю этого конфликта, не знают, через какие стадии конфликт прошел, поэтому, тем более в данном случае, когда дело идет о разрешении конфликта, надо все это подчинить действиям Минской группы ОБСЕ. Спасибо.
Thank you, sir. Who wishes to speak against Amendment 4? Thank you, Ms. Barnett.
Ich bin für diese Ergänzung.
Thank you. We will now move to a vote on amendment number 4. Those in favor of amendment number 4, please raise your voting cards. And it seems clear. Please lower your cards. Thank you. All those opposed, raise your voting cards. And the chair sees none. Abstentions. Abstentions. And amendment number 4 is adopted. Amendment number 5, I call Mr. Kostunov from the Russian Federation to propose amendment number 5.
Уважаемый господин председатель, наша поправка заключается в том, чтобы дополнить в пункте 16 после слов «кризисы или конфликты» фразы «на основании решения номер 3/11». Таким образом, мы закрепим в резолюции ссылку на решение Совета министров ОБСЕ как решение с высоким мандатом. Спасибо.
Thank you. And who would seek recognition to speak against Amendment 5? Seeing none. Ms. Barnett, what is your view on Amendment 5?
Ich denke, dass man die Veränderung so vornehmen kann. Ich bin dafür.
Thank you. And so all in favor of Amendment 5, please raise your voting cards. And it seems clear. Lower your cards. Those opposed to Amendment 5, raise your voting cards. Yes, thank you, and lower your cards. And those abstaining. Any abstentions? Thank you. And amendment number 5 is adopted. We now move to amendment number 6, and the chair calls on Mr. Rashkin from the Russian Federation to propose his amendment number 6.
Костунов вместо Рашкина. Уважаемый председатель, уважаемые коллеги, мы предлагаем смягчить в пункте 16 формулировку, таким образом заменить председателю постоянного совета надлежит, то есть с обязывающей формулировки, на председатель постоянного совета может. Просто в силу, еще раз, разной природы мандатов, и таким образом, мне кажется, резолюция станет лучше.
And who wishes to speak against this amendment? No one. Ms. Barnett, what is your view?
Mit der Einfügung des Wortes kann schwächen wir die Position unseres Repräsentanten in dem Gremium ab, und deswegen bin ich dagegen.
Very well. We will now move to a vote on amendment number 6. Those in favor of amendment number 6, please raise your voting cards. All right, cards down. And those opposed to amendment number 6, raise your voting cards. Seems clear. You may lower your cards. Abstentions? And the amendment is not agreed to. I now call on Mr. Adderholt from the United States to propose amendment number 7.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This amendment makes a common sense suggestion of supporting and encouraging direct cooperation between the Parliamentary Assembly and the field operations of the OSCE. The missions work day to day on their mandates. The progress can sometimes be slow. They realize the value of visitors who can deliver political messages that can facilitate progress. They also want to ensure that there is support for their work in the capitals, and also this support is relayed to the headquarters in Vienna. By encouraging direct contacts, hopefully we can discourage bureaucracy that can prevent action from taking place. If a mission head has a good idea that could use our input, he or she should be able to contact Copenhagen and ask for our help. I would ask my colleagues to support this amendment.
Does anyone wish to speak against Amendment 7? Seeing none, Ms. Barnett, what is your view on Amendment 7?
Sehr gute Ergänzung, deswegen stehe ich ja auch auf dem bei den Unterstützern, und selbstverständlich bitte annehmen.
Are you ready to vote? All in favor of Amendment 7, please raise your voting cards. And the margin seems clear. Please lower your cards. Are there those who are opposed to Amendment 7? Seeing none, who wishes to abstain? And Amendment 7 is adopted. I now call on Mr. Slutsky from the Russian Federation to propose Amendment 8. Sir, you are recognized for 60 seconds.
Уважаемый председатель, мы хотели бы снять поправку. В логике рассмотрения лучше обойтись без нее. Спасибо.
Without objection, Amendment 8 is withdrawn. Mr. Kustinov, you are now recognized to propose Amendment number 9.
Уважаемый господин председатель, мы предлагаем в подпункте 16H после слов «представляющих интерес областях» удалить конец пункта. По той причине, что мы ни в коем случае не хотим ослабить резолюцию, но все-таки специальные представители по ОБСЕ, они имеют мандат от парламентской ассамблеи ОБСЕ, а председательство и исполнительные структуры исполнительные структуры ОБСЕ, они все-таки получают мандат от Совета министров, от заседаний глав государств. Это разная природа мандата. И записывать в резолюцию о том, что они должны согласовывать свои действия, свои заявления с нашими представителями, возможно, будет некорректно, даже то есть просто организационно. Это будет смешение исполнительной и законодательной власти. Спасибо.
And does anyone wish to speak against Amendment 9? Seeing none, Ms. Barnett, what is your view on Amendment number 9?
Ich bin der Auffassung, wir brauchen diesen Kommunikationskanal und bin deswegen für Ablehnung dieses Amendments.
And now we move to a vote on Amendment 9. Would members in favor please raise their voting cards? And thank you. You may lower your cards. Those opposed to Amendment number 9, raise your voting cards. And it is clear. Lower your cards. Are there any abstentions? And Amendment number 9 is defeated. That concludes consideration of amendments. Thank you for your cooperation. I propose that we now formally move to a vote on the draft resolution as amended. And so this is the vote on final passage. Would those in favor of adopting the draft resolution as amended please raise their voting cards? And the margin seems clear. Thank you. Lower your cards. Who will vote no on the amendment? Please raise your voting cards. And seeing none, are there those who wish to abstain? Any abstentions? And the draft resolution as amended is adopted. Congratulations, Ms. Barnett. We now move to the draft resolution on the conflict in Georgia. 3 amendments have been tabled to this draft resolution. No members have registered to speak in this debate. I call on Mr. Usupashvili of Georgia to introduce the draft resolution. Sir, you have the floor for 3 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It is my honor to present to the OSCE Parliamentary Assembly the supplementary item number 7, draft resolution on the conflict in Georgia. This issue has been widely addressed within the OSCE, including in the framework of the OSCE Parliamentary Assembly, which adopted a resolution on the situation in Georgia at the annual session in Monaco in 2012. The resolution we presented this year to reaffirm the sovereignty and territorial integrity of Georgia within its internationally recognized borders is in full adherence to the UN Charter and Helsinki Final Act. The resolution calls for the respect of the international law by the Russian Federation, including through the implementation of the European Union-mediated ceasefire agreement of August 12, 2008, as well as the reversal of the illegal recognition of Georgian regions. Grave humanitarian and human rights situation inside the occupied regions is another concern addressed in the resolution. It calls for the unhampered exercise of the right of the forcefully displaced persons to return to their homes in safety and with dignity. While stressing the importance of constructive talks within the Geneva international discussions, the resolution emphasizes the need to establish international security arrangements in the occupied regions of Georgia and allow for unimpeded access of the European Union monitoring mission there. Conflict in Georgia affects not only my home country, but wider region and the whole European security architecture, as we witness continuous violation of the key tenets of the international law. Therefore, it is paramount that the Assembly keeps the issue of the conflict in Georgia high on its agenda to ensure that the Russian Federation complies with the standards of international law and the rights of ordinary citizens are protected. With this, I call on the distinguished delegates to vote in favor of the resolution. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As I mentioned earlier, the chair is reluctant to add members to the speakers list. So unless there's a member that urgently wants to speak at this point and no one has signed up for the debate, I suggest we conclude the debate on the draft resolution and move to amendments. Is there objection to that? Then shall we move to amendments? We now have 3. Yes, sir, you are recognized to speak in general debate on the draft resolution.
Спасибо, господин председатель, потому что я информирован о том, что я записан в спикере по этому вопросу. Я вынужден напомнить позицию, которую мы озвучили на постоянном комитете. Речь идет о том, что проект резолюции является крайне политизированным, откровенно антироссийским документом. Состоит он из стандартного набора претензий к Российской Федерации, включая якобы оккупацию Южной Осетии и Абхазии через интеграционные договоры, а также нарушение прав человека путем возведения проволочного забора. Текстуальные доработки, таким образом, по нашему мнению, документ не подлежит, и мы вынуждены голосовать против этой резолюции, поскольку она, прежде всего, политически мотивирована и игнорирует волеизъявления народов Южной Осетии и Абхазии. Я просто хочу вам привести один пример. Явной натяжкой является утверждение о том, что грузинские беженцы лишены права на возвращение. Так, на территорию Республики Абхазия, вы вдумайтесь в эту цифру, преимущественно в Гальский район вернулись около 50 тысяч грузинских беженцев. Я бы хотел, чтобы председатель услышал эти слова. Он почему-то снял наушники и не прислушивается. Неужели абсолютно все равно, что прозвучит в этом зале? Мы, конечно, привыкли к подобному отношению, но, честно говоря, вызывает удивление, пренебрежение позиции одного из депутатов, который от имени делегации озвучивает эту позицию. Господин председатель, я вас призываю все-таки услышать голос. Итак, 50 тысяч грузинских беженцев вернулись в Гальский район Абхазии. И это единственный пример, когда беженцы возвращаются в район, где конфликт еще не затих. Своей резолюцией мы можем, как говорят у нас, плеснуть бензин, керосин в костер затухающего конфликта. Постановляющие пункты 1, 2, 4, 6 призывают исключительно Россию предпринять некие шаги для облегчения грузинских бед. Ну, бед я бы назвал, взял эти слова в кавычки, что абсолютно неприемлемо и далеко от реальности. Россия примет любое консолидированное решение грузинских властей, которое они могут принять с руководством Абхазии и Осетии. Я думаю, что эта позиция необходимости ведения прямых переговоров должна быть поддержана депутатами Парламентской ассамблеи ОБСЕ. Спасибо вам за внимание.
Thank you, Mr. Kovalev. And okay, the chair recognizes the delegate from Bulgaria.
Thank you very much, Chairman. Just a few words. First of all, maybe as a reaction to the statement of the Russian delegation, I think that this resolution could have been amended with some of their proposals. They have made such proposals, and we could have tried to make it more balanced if they feel that it's not balanced. So at this stage, I believe that we can either approve it or refuse it, but it seems to me that most of the elements of this resolution need to be supported. I'll tell you just a little story, and I turn to you, to all of you, to try and find a solution to that. As a special representative on South Caucasus by the end of May, I have visited the village of Kurvaleti, where the issue of borderization have taken, stage where we could simply not understand how this would be possible at all. I mean, the razor wire was cutting a village into two, and an old man, his name is Vanishvili, was cut from his daughter, for example. His wife is ill, he has to get her medicine through the wire. He communicates with his wife through the wire. He's not able to cross into the administrative border line now anymore, and he cannot visit his relatives. So I turn to all of you, including the Russian side and all that are responsible for that, to try and find solution for such humanitarian cases, which are not, this is not the only one. So politics is important, global politics is for sure something very important, but I think that lives of people are more important than that, and we should at least start solving issues by solving these humanitarian cases. So I would say that this resolution might not be as balanced as probably some of us would like to see, but I would ask you to support it, because this is opening a possibility to start solving at least these heavy humanitarian issues. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Let me just state on behalf of the chair, we had no names on our list signed up for general debate on this draft resolution, but clearly we do want to accommodate all sides of the discussion, and therefore we're happy to open it up to the two previous speakers. Is it all right if we now move ahead to consider amendments? The three amendments have been tabled, and copies of amendments have been made available. The correct version of the draft resolution is entitled SC 16 SI 7. The correct version of the amendments is entitled AS 16 SI 7 Amend. May I remind members that the 1-minute time limit for speakers continues to apply, and I call now on Ms. Fry from Canada to propose amendment number 1. Ma'am, you are recognized.
Hi, this is John Aldag from Canada speaking instead of Dr. Fry.
Very well.
We're suggesting inserting the words politically binding before the Helsinki Final Act. This amendment clarifies that the Helsinki Final Act is not a part of the body of international law. It is a politically binding document, not legally binding. As the paragraph stands now, it could be understood to say that the Act is international law, which would be inaccurate, and so this amendment would clarify the intent. Thank you.
And does anyone wish to speak against amendment number 1? And what is Mr. Usapashvili's opinion of the amendment?
I'm in favor of the amendment.
All right, are you ready to vote? All in favor of amendment number 1, please raise your voting cards. And the margin seems clear. You may lower your voting cards. Those opposed and abstentions. And the amendment is adopted. I call on Mr. Dobre from Romania to propose amendment number 2.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. After paragraph 12, insert a new paragraph as follows. Encourage the current German OSCE chairmanship, together with the Conflict Prevention Center, to continue exploring possibility to re-establish a meaningful OSCE presence throughout Georgia, which would considerably strengthen the OSCE's engagement in the Geneva international discussion and incident prevention and response mechanism, as well as in the implementation of conflict prevention and conflict building measures. We consider necessary the insertion of new paragraph that will underline the importance of OSCE presence in Georgia. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Does anyone wish to speak against amendment number 2? And what is the position of Mr. Usupashvili concerning amendment number 2?
I'm in favor of amendment number 2.
Are you ready to vote? Those in favor of amendment number 2, raise your voting cards. Thank you. You may lower your cards. Those opposed, raise your voting cards. And there are none abstentions. And amendment number 2 is adopted. Who seeks recognition to speak on amendment number 3?
Hi, it's John Aldag from Canada.
You are recognized, sir, for 60 seconds.
Thank you. This supplementary item supports the territorial integrity of Georgia. However, it is also important to include a call for human rights, and particularly the rights of minorities, to be protected. Respect for such rights is required by the Helsinki Final Act and in international law, and that's the intent of this additional paragraph. Thank you.
Who seeks recognition to speak against amendment number 3? Mr. Usupashvili, what is your opinion on amendment number 3?
Well, in this case, I would have some questions, but for the sake of the consensus, I have no objections.
Thank you very much. Are you ready to vote? All in favor of amendment number 3, raise your voting cards. And thank you. It seems clear. Those opposed, raise your voting cards. And those abstaining, abstentions. And amendment number 3 is adopted. This concludes consideration of amendments. Thank you. I propose that we now formally move to a draft resolution as amended. Would those in favor of adopting the draft resolution as amended please raise your voting card? And thank you. Cards down. With those opposed, please raise your voting cards. Thank you. And who wishes to abstain? Any abstentions? Yes. Thank you. And the draft resolution as amended is adopted. Thank you and congratulations, Mr. Usupashvili. We now move to the draft resolution on reconsolidating European security as a common project. 7 amendments have been tabled to this draft resolution, and I now call on Mr. Lombardi of Switzerland to introduce the draft resolution. Sir, you are recognized for 3 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, dear colleagues. The idea of this resolution is to take profit for the benefit of OSCE work and future developments of the experience which have been done during 1.5 years by this panel of eminent persons on European security as a common project. This panel was established by the Troika beginning of 2015 and was led by Ambassador Wolfgang Ischinger. 15 personalities, not principally acting politicians, but former politicians or wise people of 15 different countries took part, and they produced 2 reports, an interim report on lessons learned from the OSCE from its engagement in Ukraine, and a final report back to diplomacy in December 2015. So in 1 year time, this panel was able to have very fruitful discussions. Not all the members could agree with all the conclusions, but the particularity of this work was that there was a possibility of exchange without barriers, without borders, in an informal way, but a very serious, scientific way. And at the end, this final report, if you read it, it's not a very big one. It's a short booklet like this, but it's very interesting because you have the view from the Western side, the view from the Russian side, the view from the in-between countries. And I think this work, the Swiss delegation believes this work was a valuable one. all participants, also those who disagreed with some points in the conclusions, stressed the importance of such a panel, of such a working group, very open and able to compare the different perceptions we have in the West, in the East, and in between. And we believe it's important that this work goes on. So the purpose of this resolution is to encourage the German chairmanship and the future chairmanship of OSCE to go on with the system, not with the same people, not with the same panel, but the system, the idea that you take together people of different countries and you give them the possibility to express the different perceptions they have on the realities. The European reality, the OSCE reality is changing very quickly, and it is important that the different perceptions come together, and there is some paper somewhere where you can really find that this discussion has taken place and you can look to some conclusions. Therefore, I would like to invite you to adopt this resolution. There are some amendments. Some of them are improving the text, and I'm ready to accept them. A couple of them, on the opposite, will try to diminish the role of this experience of this panel, and I would like, therefore, to suggest you then to reject those amendments, but we'll speak in the details later on. Thank you.
Floor is now open for debate. The time limit for speeches is 3 minutes. One member has registered his interest, and Mr. Gagamayan of Armenia, you are recognized for 3 minutes, sir.
Предлагаемый проект резолюции имеет исключительно актуальное значение. Достаточно сказать, что опыт сотрудничества Российской Федерации, Соединенных Штатов Америки и Европы в вопросе искоренения терроризма в Сирии хоть и с трудом, но продвигается вперед, и благодаря этому спасены сотни и тысячи человеческих жизней. Да, есть разные подходы, но цель общая – задушить в зародыше терроризм. И эту поправку надо рассматривать именно исключительно в этом ракурсе. Если рассматривать в этом ракурсе, то реконсолидация предполагает выработку консолидированного подхода к решению актуальнейших задач. Выработать консолидированный подход невозможно в условиях, когда демонизируется одна страна, в данном случае Россия, чей вклад в укрощение и искоренение терроризма трудно переоценить. В 1975 году, в разгар холодной войны, представители 35 стран Европы, Америка и Канада выработали Хельсинкский заключительный акт, в основу которого положены 10 принципов. Изначально для наших героических, я бы сказал, предков было ясно одно: любой ценой достичь разрядки международной напряженности, потому что холодная война могла перерасти в горячую войну. И это им удалось, и основополагающим документом был принят Хельсинкский заключительный акт, основанный на 10 принципах. Причем специально там было оговорено, что все 10 принципов имеют одинаковую императивность и должны применяться единовременно. К сожалению, в ходе наших обсуждений по самым разным вопросам мы видим, что предпочтение отдается одному-двум из этих 10 принципов. Казалось бы, ну и что? А вся опасность кроется в том, что избирательное применение хельсинкских принципов, оно создает благодатную почву для развязывания войны, для развязывания агрессии. Пользуясь случаем, я хочу выразить благодарность моему коллеге Филиппо Ломбарди, который с исключительно важной инициативой выступил буквально вчера. И в скором времени мне представляется, что государства Южного Кавказа, их представители, встретятся в Швейцарии, чтобы в открытой дискуссии проработать все то, что открывается принятием этой резолюции. Спасибо.
Thank you, sir. That concludes debate on the draft resolution. We will now move to consider the amendments submitted to the draft resolution. 7 amendments have been tabled, and copies of the amendments have been made available. The correct version of the draft resolution is entitled SC 16S19. The correct version of the amendments is entitled AS 16S19 Amend. And I remind members that the 1-minute time limit for speakers continues to apply. Mr. Kostunov, you are recognized to propose amendment number 1.
Спасибо, господин председатель. Мы предлагаем дополнить пункт 7 упоминанием Хартии европейской безопасности и Астанинской юбилейной декларации. Это позволит улучшить резолюцию и подчеркнет то, что мы про эти документы тоже помним и готовы исполнять.
Does anyone wish to speak against the amendment? Mr. Lombardi, what is your view on the amendment?
I consider the amendment an improvement of the text and I accept it.
I now put amendment number 1 to the vote. Will those in favor of the amendment please raise their voting cards? And thank you. Please lower your cards. Who will vote no on the amendment? And seeing none, abstentions, and the amendment is adopted. I now call on Ms. Bielkova from Ukraine to propose amendment number 2.
Dear Mr. Chair, dear colleagues, our proposal is just to stress importance of respect to all principles of international law, including those declarations which are mentioned in the paragraph. Thank you.
And would anyone wish to speak against amendment number 2? Mr. Lombardi, what is your view on amendment number 2?
Thank you. I consider it positively. I accept the amendment.
Are you ready to vote? Those in favor of amendment number 2, please raise your voting cards. Thank you, and you may lower your cards. Who will vote no? Are there votes against? Thank you, yes, and abstentions, and amendment number 2 is agreed to. We'll move now to amendment number 3, and Mr. Slutsky, you are recognized to speak for 60 seconds.
Морозов вместо Слуцкого. Уважаемые коллеги, у нас есть предложение несколько поправить пункт номер 8, поскольку известно, что итоговый доклад возвращения к дипломатии, он не получил консенсуса среди специалистов, которые над ним работали. Поэтому наше предложение такое. Вместо слова «приветствует» пометить ремаркой «принимает к сведению рекомендации группы видных деятелей» и далее по тексту. И в итоговом докладе считаем, что вот это сочетание нужно разделить. В итоговом, не получившем консенсуса докладе, и тогда все будет корректно.
Who wishes to speak against amendment number 3? Yes, yes, ma'am, you are recognized.
Thank you. Our delegation thinks it is not appropriate to weaken this paragraph because we all just agreed that European security is a very important matter, and for that reason we should not weaken the paragraph which was proposed by the sponsor. Thank you.
What is Mr. Lombardi's opinion of the amendment?
Thank you, Chair. I reject the amendment. Taking note is not the same as welcoming. I think it's very clear that we want, in my opinion, we want to express a positive appreciation of the work of this panel and of its report. It's not written in my resolution that it was a consensual report. I just said myself in the beginning, we know there was one representative who expressed some disagreement, and the other one said, "Okay, I didn't take part in the final version." But both of them write in their letter, and you find the letter as annex to the report, they write that they agree with some of the assessments and proposals and appreciate that a number of my ideas were taken into consideration. So it's not consensual. I don't pretend it's consensual, but I think this report is really valuable, quoting both sides and then trying to come to some conclusions and recommendations. So I really wouldn't like to weaken the sense of this paragraph and of the whole resolution, and I ask you to reject the amendment.
We will now vote on amendment number 3. Will those in favor of Amendment 3.
Уважаемый господин председатель,
For what purpose does the gentleman seek recognition?
Морозов, поэтому мы снимаем свою поправку, поскольку господин Ломбарди убедил нас в том, что его текст в этой позиции как раз усиливает доклад.
And without objection, the amendment is withdrawn. Amendment number 4, Mr. Kovalev of the Russian Federation is recognized on amendment number 4.
Морозов вместо Ковалева. В пункте 9 у нас есть предложение скорректировать формулировку «брать за основу выводы и рекомендации группы видных деятелей по европейской безопасности». Ну, в общем, потому что понятно, что работают по европейской безопасности и дипломаты, и военные, и поэтому мы хотели бы скорректировать ее, заменив словами «снова включиться» и далее по тексту в обсуждение по существу вопросов европейской безопасности.
And does anyone wish to speak against amendment number 4? Mr. Lombardi, what is your view on amendment number 4?
Thank you, Chair. I also would like to reject this amendment, ask you to reject it. Once again, it would weaken the meaning of the resolution. Since we consider this report as something quite unique, it's a short report, not a big book, everyone can read, but in 1 hour you can read it, but it's really a meaningful paper, and the recommendations which are taken in this, document are valuable. So just to skip them would weaken the meaning of the resolution. I urge you to keep the original text and reject the amendment.
I shall now put amendment number 4 to the vote. Will all those in favor of amendment 4 please raise their voting cards? And all those opposed to Amendment 4, please raise your voting cards. And thank you. You may lower your cards. Are there abstentions? Thank you. And the amendment is defeated. Number 5, the chair calls on Ms. Bielkova from Ukraine to propose amendment number 5.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Dear colleagues, our amendment is just to stress our unsatisfaction with the current state of events in some of the OSCE countries. So we would like to stress importance of the intensification of the efforts we all could achieve in order to achieve peace and security in the region. Thank you.
Thank you. Does anyone wish to speak against amendment number 5? What is Mr. Lombardi's opinion of the amendment?
I accept it.
Are you ready to vote? Those in favor of the amendment, please raise your voting cards. Thank you. Those opposed, please raise your voting cards. And abstentions, and the amendment is agreed to. We now move to amendment number 6. Who seeks recognition to speak in favor of amendment number 6? Yes, sir, you are recognized.
Спасибо, господин председатель. Уважаемые коллеги, на наш взгляд, та поправка, которую мы предлагаем, просто усиливает и дополняет блестящий текст, который господин Ломбарди приготовил для всех нас. Речь идет о том, что мы призываем не только обеспечить полное соблюдение и имплементацию всех согласованных принципов ОБСЕ, но и добавляем слово «обязательств» в области европейской безопасности. Еще раз говорю, мне кажется, что это усилит эффект от выполнения этого пункта. Просил бы поддержать нашу поправку. Спасибо.
Does anyone wish to speak against amendment number 6? And Mr. Lombardi, what is your opinion of the amendment?
I accept the excellent amendment which was put to the excellent text.
Thank you, sir. I shall now put amendment number 6 to the vote. Will all in favor of amendment 6 please raise your voting cards? And thank you. You may lower your cards. Those opposed, please raise your voting cards. Thank you. And abstentions? Thank you, and the amendment is adopted. I now call on Mr. Slutsky of the Russian Federation to propose Amendment 7.
Морозов вместо Слуцкого. Пункт 12, мы считаем, что он завершающий, он как бы подводит итоги всей резолюции, и господин Ломбарди, наверное, согласен с ней, потому что он тоже является одним из авторов вот этой новой формулировки, которая расширяет последний пункт и говорит о том, что настоятельно призывает все государства-участники ОБСЕ к участию в политическом процессе по восстановлению доверия и строительству общего и неделимого евроатлантического и евразийского сообщества безопасности. И я думаю, что этот пункт поставит точку этой великолепной резолюции.
Does anyone seek recognition? Yes, the delegate from Ukraine.
Thank you. We think such an amendment is premature. We think that Eurasian security community would not be possible until Russia stops its aggression and restores respect to fundamental OSCE principles. Thus, we recommend that we retain a regional version. Thank you.
For what purpose does the gentlelady from really, are you seeking recognition? Okay, we can only have one speaker against the amendment. And what says Mr. Lombardi with regard to the amendment?
Thank you. Well, the question is actually whether we would like to introduce a new wording. We usually speak of OSCE as a whole, and we don't make these distinctions. It is true that if you read this report of the panel, you understand that there are these two different perceptions, and the purpose must be to bring these two positions, two perceptions of security back together. In that sense, the Russian amendment has a certain meaning. It is to try to identify two concepts of security which we want to bring together in the field of OSCE. So I leave it to the Assembly to decide whether she accepts this. For me, I would have no objection to this amendment.
Are you ready to vote on Amendment 7? Would those in favor of Amendment 7 please raise your voting cards? Thank you. Please lower your voting cards. Those opposed, please raise your voting cards. The vote is clear, and those abstaining. Thank you. 4 abstentions. Thank you, and the amendment is not agreed to. That concludes the consideration of amendments. Thank you. I propose we now formally move to a vote on the draft resolution as amended. Would those in favor of adopting the draft resolution as amended, please raise your voting cards. And thank you. It is clear. And those opposed, please raise your voting cards. And are there any abstentions? And the draft resolution as amended is adopted. Congratulations, Mr. Lombardi. We now move to the draft resolution on the Republic of Moldova. 8 amendments have been tabled to this draft resolution. I call on Ms. Dade of Albania to introduce the draft resolution. Ms. Dade, you have the floor for 3 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Dear colleagues, in April we participated in the parliamentary seminar in Lensweiler, which considered parliamentary contributions to OSCE efforts in addressing conflicts. This was the occasion to begin a fruitful conversation with our colleague from delegation of Moldova, Sergei Sirbu, on the work of the parliamentary team and the ways the OSCE Parliamentary Assembly can play a role in Moldova. Cooperation with other members of the parliamentary team on Moldova and in consultation with the delegation of Moldova, I have proposed a supplementary item on the Republic of Moldova to be considered at this annual session. I believe the adoption of this document is essential to underscore once more the OSCE Parliamentary Assembly's commitment to peace, stability, and the rule of law in the Republic of Moldova, and to finding a peaceful and sustainable solution to the Transnistrian conflict. This supplementary item has been co-sponsored by 32 MPs from 20 countries, while 7 valid amendments have been proposed. I thank my colleagues for their valuable contributions, and I thank the Standing Committee for forwarding the supplementary item to on the Republic of Moldova for consideration during this annual session. This draft resolution welcomes the chairmanship in office active efforts to revitalize the transition settlement process. The active approach spearheaded by the Special Representative for the transition settlement process, and especially the role of Ambassador Scanlan of the OSCE presence there, has largely contributed to unifying the position of the mediators and observers in the settlement process. This should be commended, in particular in light of Moldova's divisive geopolitical environment. The international community efforts, and especially the relaunching of the negotiations in the format 5+2, this is very important, and the Parliamentary Assembly of OSCE has a very significant role to play, especially in asking the legislative bodies on both sides of Dnistr River to set together and encourage the working groups which now are on the way to talk about a lot of questions which are to the benefit of the people of Moldova on both sides of Dnistr River. I am confident that this committee will adopt this resolution, and there are 2 oral amendments which I've forwarded for today in cooperation with my colleagues from Moldova delegation who have withdrawn their amendments, and these amendments have been integrated in my rewording of the 2 paragraphs, which doesn't touch on the essence, but is just a reformatting of the paragraphs. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Dade. The floor is now open for debate, and 1 member has requested to speak in general debate. I now call on Mr. Sârbu of Moldova. Sir, you have the floor for 3 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. President. Dear Mr. Chairman, dear colleagues, on behalf of the Republic of Moldova, I would like to convey my thanks to the OSCE Parliamentary Assembly for its support and attention towards Moldova. We highly appreciate the OSCE role in its capacity of mediator in the process of settlement of Transnistrian conflict. We also share the positive assessment on the resumption on the official 5+2 talks, ILIA, last month in Berlin, after a 2-year break. I would like to use this opportunity to thank the German chairmanship for tireless efforts in resuming the negotiation process, which we consider as a common success of all those involved. We hope that the 5+2 round in Berlin, as well eventual Bavaria conference, will pave the way for result-oriented discussions. I would like particularly to express my gratitude and highly appreciation for the activity of OSCE-EPA's group on Moldova and its chairwoman Arta Dade for her efforts, as well as for the initiative to promote a supplementary item on Moldova. I consider that June's visit of OSCE-EPA's group in Moldova was an important one, which will directly contribute to the deepening of dialogue on Transnistrian problem settlement. Using this opportunity, I would like to thank the members of the committee who voted an amendment on the general report of the committee yesterday, which reconfirmed the sovereignty and territorial integrity of the Republic of Moldova in light of Transnistrian conflict settlement. At the same time, I would like to thank Mr. Dade for support the 2 oral amendments. I think this will improve the document and additional value to our common scope. Thank you in advance.
Thank you, Mr. Sârbu. And that concludes debate on the draft resolution. We will now move to consider the amendments submitted to the draft resolution. 8 amendments have been tabled. and copies of the amendments have been made available. The correct version of the draft resolution is entitled SC 16 S111. The correct version of the amendments is entitled AS 16 S111 Amend. However, please note that we have been informed by the Romanian delegation that they are withdrawing amendments 7 and 8 as was pointed out in the previous speech. And may I remind members that the 1-minute time limit will be strictly enforced. I call on Ms. Nasser from Romania to propose amendment number 1.
Okay. First, Serbo will speak in first amendment.
Thank you, sir. Yes, you are recognized for 1 minute.
We consider necessary the insertion of a new paragraph in order to emphasizing the positive aspects resulted from the implementation of the free trade framework DCFTA in Transnistrian region since 1st January 2016. Economic convergence should inevitably contribute to the political alignment between the right and left banks of Dniester. This insertion will offer the positive additional value to resolution. Thank you.
Does anyone wish to speak against amendment number 1? What is Ms. Dade's opinion of the amendment?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I accept this paragraph to be included in the original text. Thank you.
I shall now put amendment number 1 to the vote. Will all those in favor of amendment number 1 please raise their voting cards? Thank you, and you may lower your cards. Those opposed, please raise your voting cards. Thank you. And those abstaining, any abstentions? And the amendment is agreed to. After amendment number 1, there is an oral amendment to paragraph 7 from the Moldova delegation. This will be taken before amendment 2 in accordance with the rules. Can I invite the delegation from Moldova to present the oral amendment? Who seeks recognition?
So,
Ms. Dade, you are recognized.
thank you, Mr. Chair. So the paragraph will read like this. Underlining the importance of having a positive example set by the autonomous territorial unit of Gagauzia in terms of social, economic development and cohesion. So there is an integration of the former amendment, and so the text will read like this. And the texts have been presented since yesterday. Thank you.
And thank you. And as I understand, this amendment has been worked out between Ms. Dade and the Moldovan delegation. It is an oral amendment. Is there objection to consideration of the oral amendment? Seeing none, it will be considered. Now, who wishes to speak in favor of the amendment? Sir, you are recognized. The delegate from Moldova.
Yeah, we recognize this amendment.
Thank you very much. Someone else in the back had sought recognition. Who wishes to speak against the amendment? No one seeks recognition. And Ms. Dade, I'm guessing that you're in favor of the amendment.
Yes, Mr. Speaker, I am.
Are you ready to vote? All in favor, please raise your voting cards. Thank you very much. Lower your voting cards. And all opposed, please raise your voting cards. And there are none. Who wishes to abstain? And I thank the members for their cooperation in, and the amendment is adopted. Amendment 2 now falls, and we proceed to Amendment 3 and 4. Amendments 3 and 4 relate to the text in paragraph 11, which is on the Transnistrian conflict settlement process. We will therefore group the amendments together for discussion as allowed under the rules, and I call on Mr. Kasian from Moldova to propose amendment number 3.
Sirbu will speak. Point 11 has two amendments that, as a matter of fact, have the same sense. The formulation proposed by Mr. Gorilla is more comprehensive. I consider a compromise solution would be to accept the formulation of amendment number 4. We are convinced that the Russian Federation will also support this amendment, as we know that the Russian part has never gave up this commitment to withdraw of military contingent from the territory of Republic of Moldova. I ask for your support. Thank you.
Sir, are you suggesting that amendment number 3 not be adopted and that amendment 4 be adopted instead? Is that?
Yes, yes.
Yes, sir.
Amendment 4, yes.
Right. Who wishes to speak against either amendment? Does anyone wish to speak against? Yes, sir, you are recognized from the Russian Federation. Yes, sir.
Спасибо, господин спикер. Хотел попросить 2 минуты. Против 2 поправок хочу выступить. И объясню почему. Я сам родился на территории Молдавской Республики, и мои предки за 200 лет по материнской линии похоронены на территории Молдавской Республики. Я, конечно, отслеживаю, что там происходит. Вопрос о переформатировании российской миротворческой миссии не является предметом для многосторонних дискуссий. Этот вопрос может решаться только в ходе переговоров участников миротворческой операции, а это Москва, Кишинев и Тирасполь. Это очень важный момент, поэтому будем голосовать против обеих этих поправок. И хочу обратить ваше внимание, что сейчас там ситуация стабильная, идет переговорный процесс, и любые позывы изменить силовой баланс, это значит предложение к силовому решению. Мы прекрасно понимаем, если там не будет миротворческой миссии, появится соблазн решить вопрос силой, то есть убивать людей. Россия этого позволить не может.
The chair now calls on Mr. Gorilla from Moldova to propose amendment number 4.
No, I'll speak for Mr. Gorilla.
And I suppose you're in favor of it?
Of course.
And
of course.
What says Ms. Dade with regard to amendment number 4?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I do accept the amendment to paragraph number 11, which means amendment number 4, which is more complete. It is more in conformity with the reality. And of course, we have to remind the Russian Federation to meet the commitments taken in the Istanbul Conference concerning the withdrawal of destruction of its ammunition, weapons and military equipment from the territory of the Republic of Moldova, which is a commitment, and we all know that the Russian Federation has taken it for itself. And it's time now that this can be transformed into a peacekeeping mechanism, into an international civilian mission under the OSCE auspices. So this amendment makes the text even better, and it is even more binding to the reality and to the commitment the Russian Federation has taken itself vis-à-vis the Conference of Istanbul. Thank you very much.
All right, we will now move to vote. Please note that if Amendment 3 is adopted, Amendment 4 will be preempted and not put to the vote. Will those in favor of Amendment 3 please raise their voting cards? Seeing none, those opposed to Amendment 3, please raise your voting cards. Thank you. And who wishes to abstain? And the amendment is not agreed to. We are now moved to Amendment number 4. Are you ready to vote? All in favor of Amendment number 4, please raise your voting cards. Thank you, and the margin seems clear. Those opposed, please raise your voting cards. Thank you. And who wishes to abstain? And Amendment number 4 is agreed to. Amendments 5 and 6 relate to text in paragraph 13, which relates to dialogue between the Moldovan Parliament and the Transnistrian Legislative Assembly. The chair will therefore group the amendments together for discussion as before. Please note that the chair will take Amendment 6 first, then Amendment 5, in line with Rule 22.5 of the Rules of Procedure. I call on Ms. Nasser of Romania to propose Amendment 6. Ma'am, you are recognized.
Serbu will speak on amendment number 6. We consider necessary to amend the paragraph 13 in order to reflect the ongoing efforts of the Parliament in Chisinau to create a platform for dialogue with the Supreme Soviet in Tiraspol. Thank you.
And who wishes to speak against? No, let's move to Mr. Slutsky of the Russian Federation to propose amendment number 5, and then we'll ask for people to speak against either. Who will speak? Who seeks recognition to speak in behalf of amendment 5? Sir, you are recognized.
Костунов вместо Слуцкого. Уважаемый председатель, уважаемые коллеги, мы предлагаем в пункте 13 после слов Законодательного собрания Приднестровья снять формулировку под эгидой парламентской группы по Молдове. Просто по той причине, что мы не понимаем, что за группа парламентская по Молдове. Если докладчик пояснит, какая именно парламентская группа по Молдове имеется в виду, может, мы изменим свое мнение. К поправке 6, в общем-то, та же самая претензия, то, что упоминается некоторая неизвестная нам парламентская группа по Молдове. Но еще раз повторю, что главное, мы приветствуем любой переговорный процесс и против изменения силового баланса в регионе.
And now the chair calls on anyone who wishes to speak against Amendment 6. Against Amendment 6, the chair recognizes Ms. Dade.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Now, Ms. Dade, you will be given an opportunity to speak. If there are there others who wish to speak against Amendment 6? How about against Amendment 5? And now, Ms. Dade, you'll be recognized to tell us your view on both of these amendments. Bearing in mind, we will vote on 6 first and then 5.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I do accept the replace of paragraph 13 with the following after the amendment by colleagues from Romania, Slovenia, Moldova, Greece, Czech Republic, and the United States. So I do agree that my paragraph number 13 be replaced by the paragraph suggested by the colleagues. So I accept Amendment 6. Concerning Amendment 5, you know, I'm glad now, after I heard my colleague from Russian Federation, that I always thought it must have been a misunderstanding not to accept the role of Parliamentary Assembly of OSCE to encourage our colleagues of legislative bodies on both sides of Misty River to come together and start negotiating. So I don't know why they want to just do away with the job we have already started. After 4 years, it has been stopped, and I'm glad that my colleagues are also committed to that. I may also invite my colleagues from Russian Federation to be part of the group, because I can imagine they have a lot to do with this. After our visit, especially in Tiraspol, we met the chair of the assembly there. We were very well received, even by the leader of Transnistria. We talked a lot with them, and I'm sorry the Russian colleagues do not have any information about that. So, as long as we are accepted and thanked on our role, on our visit to the Republic of Moldova, it's beyond the point that this group should not function anymore. I think it's a moment I want to thank my colleagues for the job done, for the commitment, and I invite also the Russian Federation to be part of the group. Thank you.
Thank you. And
so I reject amendment number 5.
Thank you. And I shall now put Amendment 6 and then 5 to the vote in turn. Please note that, as before, if Amendment 6 is adopted, Amendment 5 will be preempted, will not be put to a vote. Will those in favor of Amendment 6 please raise their voting cards? And the vote seems clear. Cards down. Those opposed to Amendment 6, please raise their voting cards. Abstentions? And thank you. And Amendment 6 is adopted. Therefore, Amendment 5 is preempted and will not be put to the vote. It is my understanding that Amendments 7 and 8 have been withdrawn. We now come to what I understand is the final oral amendment. Who seeks recognition from the delegation from Moldova to propose their oral amendment?
I think it's going to be Ms. Dadi.
Yes, sir, you are recognized.
We support the formulation for Ms. Dadi. Ms. Dadi formulation.
Who will be the mover of the oral amendment? Ms. Dade is recognized to move the oral amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So my oral amendment will go like this. Welcomes the establishment of a permanent working group for cooperation between the Parliament of the Republic of Moldova and the Gaugas People's Assembly, and encourages the Parliament of the Republic of Moldova and the Gaugas People's Assembly to maintain an active and constructive dialogue in order to fully harmonize the existing legislation and continue doing so in the light of the recent developments. So what I mean is...
Now, if you'll wait for a moment. The amendment has been proposed, and I will now ask if there is an objection to consideration of the oral amendment. Seeing none, we will now move to consideration. And Ms. Dade, you are recognized to speak on the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So the amendment is made in cooperation with those who had suggested amendment number 7, meaning the colleagues from Moldova and Romania. So I have integrated their concerns. It was just a matter of rewording the content of this paragraph. So that's why I've done so, and I appeal on you to accept this oral amendment as long as no one is against that. Thank you.
All right. Who wishes to speak against the amendment? Anyone at all? Seeing none, we will move to a vote on the oral amendment. Are you ready to vote? All those in favor of the oral amendment, please raise your voting cards. And the issue seems clear. Please lower your cards. Those opposed, please raise your voting cards. Are there abstentions? Thank you. And the oral amendment is agreed to. That concludes the consideration of amendments. Thank you all. I now propose that we formally move to a vote on the draft resolution as amended. With those in favor of adopting the draft resolution as amended, raise their voting cards. Thank you, and please lower your cards. Those opposed to the draft resolution as amended, please raise your voting cards. And are there abstentions? The draft resolution as amended is adopted. Congratulations, Ms. Dade.
Mr. Chair.
Perhaps we can, ladies and gentlemen, we at some point we're going to have to vote. And we normally take around 20 minutes to vote. Do you think we could do the Baltic Sea resolution in 15 minutes, and that would leave us another 15 minutes? We could take care of another resolution. Shall we do that? Let's proceed. Let's now move to the draft resolution on enhanced cooperation and confidence building measures in the Baltic Sea region. 7 amendments have been tabled. I call on Mr. Klimke of Germany to introduce the draft resolution. Mr. Klimke, you have the floor, being mindful of the time. You are recognized.
Ja, danke sehr, Herr Vorsitzender. Das diesjährige Generalthema heißt 25 Jahre parlamentarische Zusammenarbeit, Vertrauen und Vertrauen über Dialog aufbauen. Und genau das ist das, was ich als Sonderbeauftragter auch für die Ostseeregion unterstützen möchte. Noch ist die Kooperation im Ostseeraum eng, aber sie ist gefährdet. Wir brauchen eine vertiefende Kooperation, wir brauchen vertrauensbildende Maßnahmen in der Ostseeregion. Und deswegen haben wir diesen Antrag eingebracht, der auch bewusst in Ton und Inhalt auf Verständigung ausgerichtet ist. 3 Punkte liegen mir besonders am Herzen. Der erste Punkt ist eine Situation, bei der wir feststellen, dass es eine Zunahme von Konflikten und sicherheitsrelevanten Vorfällen über und auf der Ostsee gibt. Wir brauchen dazu insbesondere zu der Beurteilung der Schiffsbewegung, der Flugzeugbewegung ein Konfliktmonitoring in der Ostsee, das die sicherheitsrelevanten Ereignisse schneller evaluiert, effizienter darauf reagiert. Deswegen brauchen wir multilaterale Gesprächsformate, um Waffenstillstände umzusetzen, zu überwachen und vertrauensbildende Maßnahmen zu etablieren. Ich habe deswegen in den letzten Monaten auch eine Vielzahl von Gesprächen im Ostseeraum geführt. Eine multilaterale Monitoringstelle, die alle sicherheitsrelevanten Vorfälle im Ostseeraum evaluiert, könnte ein Ergebnis sein, unter Einbeziehung auch der verantwortlichen Staaten, aller verantwortlichen Staaten und der bestehenden Organisation. Zweitens möchte ich den Jugendaustausch in der Ostsee voranbringen, Schul- und Universitätspartnerschaften im Langzeitaustausch. Wir haben so etwas schon, aber für den gesamten Ostseeraum benötigen wir etwas mehr Initiative in diesem Bereich. Die Vizeaußenminister der Ostseeregion haben das auch vor 4 Wochen in Warschau beschlossen und die Bedeutung des Jugendaustausches für den Ostseeraum hervorgerufen. Drittens, die Ostsee hat die Chance, das Miteinander zu fördern. Deswegen sollten wir auch hier bei uns eine Ostseegruppe in der OSZE, Parlamentarische Versammlung, etablieren und uns regelmäßig auf dieser Ebene regional, aber auch hier im Rahmen unserer Sitzungen austauschen. Das sind eigentlich die wesentlichen Punkte, um die ich für Zustimmung bitte. Gerade auch im Hinblick auf die aktuelle Situation ist es, glaube ich, notwendig, dass wir uns zu der Region Ostsee äußern. Herzlichen Dank.
Thank you, sir. I now call on Ms. Paloniemi of Finland, who is the only speaker registered to speak in general debate. Ma'am, you have the floor.
Mr. Chair, colleagues, only about 25 years ago, the Baltic Sea was the frontier between 2 opposing systems. The Iron Curtain took the shape of the sea in the region. The region was mainly characterized by political and military tension, which limited all forms of interaction. It is an era we should leave in the past. Today we must do everything to avoid extreme polarization. Today, military tension is unfortunately on the rise in the Baltic Sea. The negative circle of military activities in the region is an unfortunate development and should be stopped. The implementation of the Minsk agreement has not progressed the way we had hoped. Instead of showing off our military capacities, we should focus on reconciliation, dialogue and cooperation, both at the high level and at a very practical grassroots level. It should cover the economy, trade, environmental matters, culture, civil society, etc. Isolation is not the solution. To ensure a secure and prosperous future for the Baltic Sea region, we must improve the functioning of our internal market. In Finland, we are starting cooperation with Russia to eliminate leakage of hazardous substances from the Krasny Bori landfill into the Baltic Sea. Located near St. Petersburg, Krasny Bori has caused a lot of concern around the Baltic Sea as a result of the unmanageable leakages of waste dump. A few days ago, Finnish President Sauli Niinistö hosted a meeting with Russian President Putin in Finland. They had open and frank discussions during which Finnish President Niinistö raised his concern in particular on the security situation in the Baltic Sea region. He referred to Russian flight carriers flying without transponders over the Baltic Sea and suggested that without transponders should not be allowed. This meeting shows there is room for cooperation and dialogue also with Russia. Peaceful measures and dialogue are desperately needed and are the only means forward if we want the Baltic Sea to remain as the sea of cooperation also in the future. Thank you.
Thank you. We now move to consideration of amendments. 7 amendments have been tabled and copies of the amendments have been made available. The correct version of the draft resolution is entitled SC 16, SI 16. The correct version of the amendments is entitled AS 16, SI 16. Amend. May I remind you that the 1-minute time limit continues to apply. The chair calls on Mr. Kovalev from the Russian Federation to propose amendment number 1. Sir, you are recognized.
Господин председатель, сегодня 4 июля, День независимости Соединенных Штатов Америки, с чем мы вас искренне поздравляю. Но в резолюции упоминается и выделяется Россия как страна, не являющаяся членом ЕС. На наш взгляд, вот тот пункт, который, и та редакция, которая нами предлагается, отвечает объективной ситуации, которая складывается. Мы считаем мирное сотрудничество государств Балтийского моря одним из главных условий процветания и экономического развития данного региона. Мы предлагаем исключить из текста формулировку, не являющуюся членом ЕС России. Почему это подчеркивается из документа в документ, из пункта в пункт, мне непонятно. Давайте добавим тогда по случаю праздника США еще и дополнение через запятую, что многое зависит и от Соединенных Штатов Америки. Это будет наш подарок к Дню независимости.
Thank you, sir. Who wishes to speak against amendment number 1? Mr. Klimke, what is your view on amendment number 1?
Also im Rahmen einer ausgeglichenen Kooperation im Ostseeraum sind wir auch für diesen Änderungsantrag.
Are you ready to vote on amendment number 1? All those in favor, raise your voting cards. That seems clear. Those opposed, raise your voting cards. And the chair sees none. Are there abstentions? And thank you. And the amendment is agreed to. We now move to amendments 2 and 3. They relate to the text in paragraph 3, which is on the conflict between Russia and Ukraine. The chair will therefore group the amendments together for discussion as allowed under the rules. I call on Mr. Slutsky from the Russian Federation to propose amendment 2.
Ковалев, как один из авторов поправки. Вы знаете, ну, честно говоря, абсолютно некорректная юридическая формулировка. Нет конфликта между Россией и Украиной. Это внутриукраинский конфликт, который надлежит решить только властям Украины и только народу Украины. Они и только они вправе это сделать. Из текста в текст переходят вот эти формулировки, они лишь обостряют ситуацию. Мы любим Украину, мы любим украинский народ, мы сделаем все возможное, чтобы люди на этой земле не гибли. Вот позиция Российской Федерации. В этой связи я предлагаю исключить пункт 3 из проекта резолюции.
Thank you, and I now call on Mr. Snorre from Latvia to propose amendment number 3.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This Assembly has repeatedly given its assessment as to what is happening in Ukraine. In the resolution adopted last year, the OSCE EPA stated that it was a unilateral and unjustified assault on Ukraine's sovereignty and territorial integrity. I think we should stick to this position and when we characterize the conflict in Ukraine, and therefore I propose the corresponding amendment. Thank you.
All right. Who wishes to speak against either Amendment 2 or 3? And Mr.
Ukraine.
Yes, the gentleman from Ukraine and then the gentleman from the Russian Federation.
We agree that war in Ukraine is a real threat for Baltic Sea region and how to call this war. And PA-OSCE already gave an answer what is happening in Ukraine. There are Baku Declaration and Helsinki Declaration adopted by our organization which very clearly state that it's Russian aggression against Ukraine. So we would like to propose to vote against Amendment 2 and for Amendment 3. Thank you.
Mr. Kunov, you are recognized. Mr. Kostunov.
Уважаемые коллеги, мы выступаем против поправки 3, хотя должен оговориться, что, конечно же, некоторый конфликт между Россией и Украиной, как минимум идейный, он есть. Ведь Россия не поддержала вооруженный государственный переворот, который был организован при поддержке Соединенных Штатов Америки в Киеве в 2014 году. Россия не поддержала карательную операцию вооруженных сил Украины, которая вне всяких правовых последствий пришла на юго-восток Украины и начала убивать тысячи людей, применять тяжелое вооружение по городам. И действительно, нынешняя власть Украины, она рассматривает себя в состоянии конфликта. Именно из-за того, что мы не одобряем их действия. Поймите правильно, умирают тысячи людей. Российская Федерация против этого. И, как объяснить-то надо киевским властям? Вот они объясняют, что это конфликт с Россией и сами его подогревают. Этот пункт деструктивен и не позволяет урегулировать существующую напряженность. А это внутреннее дело Украины. Как работать с их гражданами.
Thank you. And what is Mr. Klimke's opinion of these amendments, number 2 and 3?
Zur Änderung Antrag 2 und 3. Eins haben wir ja schon beschlossen, nicht? Beziehungsweise, also ich bin gegen 2 und ich bin gegen 3, sondern für Beibehaltung des Textes, wie er im Antrag steht, wie er vorgeschlagen worden ist. Denn wir sollten tatsächlich die Sicherheitslage auch unter dem Gesichtspunkt des Konfliktes Russland-Ukraine evaluieren. Einerseits, das muss auch hier benannt werden. Zweitens sollten wir aber nicht den Begriff Aggression hineinnehmen. Das ist eine zusätzliche Aggression, die wir in diesem Zusammenhang nicht brauchen.
Thank you, and I shall now put Amendments 2 and 3 to the vote in turn. Please note that if Amendment 2 is adopted, Amendment 3 will be preempted and will not be put to a vote. Will all those in favor of Amendment 2 please raise their voting cards? Thank you. You may lower your cards. Those opposed, please raise your voting cards. And the amendment is not agreed to. Those wishing to abstain, who wishes to abstain? Amendment 2 is defeated. We now move to a vote on Amendment 3. Will all those in favor of Amendment 3 please raise their voting cards? And Mr. Chair, let's count. So lower your voting cards. Those opposed, please raise your voting cards and keep them. By a vote of 20 in favor and 28 opposed, the amendment is not agreed to. Who wishes to abstain? Who wishes to? Okay, the amendment is not agreed to, and we call on now Mr. Snorre of Latvia to propose amendment number 4.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. If the text remains as it is now, it is not clear which maneuvers we are condemning. Therefore, it inadequately equates the actions of NATO and Russia in the region. So I propose to clarify it in the paragraph. Thank you.
And who wishes to speak against amendment number 4? Yes, sir. Mr. Kostanov, you are recognized.
Спасибо большое, господин председатель. И я, кстати, в обосновании поправки услышал прямо истину. Действительно нужно уравнять действия НАТО и действия Российской Федерации в международных нейтральных территориях. Все то, что касается национальных территорий, национальной территории Российской Федерации, разумеется, у нас есть право размещать свои вооруженные силы в соответствии с международными договорами, в соответствии с мерами доверия по контролю за этими договорами, где угодно. То же самое и касается сил НАТО. Есть международные договора, есть международные договоренности о том, что силы НАТО не продвинутся дальше Восточной Германии. Ведь тогда, когда снималась эскалация, заканчивалась холодная война, были взяты некоторые обязательства. И вот все то, что касается нейтральных вод, здесь, конечно, надо уравнять действия России и НАТО. Поэтому мы будем выступать против данной поправки и считаем, что в целях мира и безопасности необходимо контролировать, чтобы никто не распространял свои вооружения на новые территории.
Mr. Klimke, what do you say with regard to the amendment?
Ich bin auch für den Änderungsantrag.
I'll now put Amendment 4 to the vote. Will all those in favor of Amendment 4 raise their voting cards? And it seems clear. Those you may lower your cards. Those opposed, please raise your voting cards. Then you may lower your cards. Abstentions. The amendment is adopted. And we now call on Mr. Kovalov from the Russian Federation to propose amendment number 5.
Морозов вместо Ковалева. Уважаемый господин председатель, уважаемые коллеги, в последнее время мы часто слышим от генерального секретаря НАТО о том, что будет усиливаться восточный фланг Североатлантического альянса. И мы видим, как наращивается военно-морская группировка в Балтийском море. И сейчас, когда мы сидим вот здесь, в Тбилиси, в Балтийском море активно участвует в военных учениях американский эсминец Дональд Кук и авианосец Эссекс. Поэтому у нас есть предложение, которое мы вынесли в пункте 5 в следующей редакции. Признавая, что маневры, необъявленные полеты с отключенными транспортерами и перемещение военных судов, особенно не принадлежащих государствам Балтийского моря, могут привести к инцидентам, чреватым существенной угрозой эскалации. То, что происходит сейчас в Балтийском море.
Thank you. Who wishes to speak against amendment number 5? Yes, the delegate from Latvia.
I would like to point out that several of the Baltic Sea countries are members of the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, and therefore, if this amendment would be adopted, it would diminish the security of those countries. So I'm strongly against it.
Mr. Klimke, what is your opinion on the amendment?
Ich bin auch gegen diesen Antrag. Mit der Begründung des Kollegen, der das eben vorgestellt hat.
Thank you. And are you ready to vote? We now put Amendment 5 to the vote. Will those in favor of Amendment 5 please raise your voting cards? Thank you. And those opposed, please raise your voting cards. And the noes do appear to have it. Lower your cards. And are there abstentions? And the amendment is not adopted. Amendment number 6, Mr. Kovalov from the Russian Federation is recognized.
Спасибо, господин спикер. Мы предлагаем формулировку, которая, на мой взгляд, не должна вызвать каких-то возражений. Мы отмечаем важную роль, которую играют страны в этом регионе, не присоединившиеся к военным блокам в региональной европейской безопасности. Потому что сейчас ситуация, если вы обратили внимание, она же очень проста. Страны, входящие в блок НАТО, голосуют за то, чтобы НАТО получило неоспоримое преимущество в Балтийском регионе во всех аспектах. Вот и вся политическая палитра. Поэтому очень важно, чтобы и страны, не присоединившиеся к военным блокам, также влияли на обеспечение безопасности в этом регионе. Они там живут, они там действуют, и их голос должен быть услышан. Именно об этом мы и призываем, чтобы голос парламентской ассамблеи был услышан. Спасибо.
And who wishes to speak against? The delegate from Ukraine.
Dear colleagues, first of all, I would like to pay your attention that all MPs who signed this amendment are originally from countries who are members of CSTO military bloc. But also I would like to stress and to remind you that in 1994 Ukraine signed Budapest Memorandum on Security Assurance. By this memorandum, Ukraine refused nuclear weapon, but three countries with nuclear weapon, Russian Federation, United States of America, and United Kingdom, guarantees to Ukraine territorial integrity. Unfortunately, 2 years ago, Russian Federation violated this Budapest Memorandum. Unfortunately, after this, Ukraine cannot advise to any country in the world neutrality as a status. That's why we propose to refuse this amendment.
And Mr. Klimke, what is your opinion on the amendment?
Also ich bin durchaus dafür, diesen Antrag anzunehmen, auch unter dem Gesichtspunkt unseres Mottos Vertrauen über Dialog aufbauen, und dazu gehören alle. Und von daher ist es durchaus richtig, dass auch diese Staaten genannt werden.
We will now move to vote on amendment number 6. Will all those in favor of amendment 6 please raise your voting cards? And thank you. You may lower your cards. And those opposed, please raise your vote. Okay, by a vote of 21 in favor, 23 opposed, the amendment is not agreed to. And we are now closing in on the final amendment to this item, and I call on Mr. Snorre of Latvia to propose this amendment 7.
Thank you. Frankly speaking, we do not quite understand what the new body proposed in the text. What will it do, and what will its functions and mandate? So I propose to delete the paragraph, therefore. Thank you.
And who wishes to speak against amendment number 7? Mr. Klimke, you have the last word.
Ja, danke sehr. Es ist für uns eben ein Essential, einer der Schwerpunkte auch unseres Antrages, diese Monitoringstelle, über die man natürlich, was die Struktur betrifft und die Kompetenz betrifft, noch reden kann. Aber sie ist notwendig, vor allen Dingen auch in Einbeziehung aller anderen Kooperationsmitglieder im Ostseeraum, die jetzt schon vorhanden sind.
Are you ready to vote on Amendment 7? All those in favor, raise your voting cards. And thank you. You may lower your cards. Those opposed, please raise your voting cards. By a vote of 15 in favor and 25 against, the amendment is defeated. This concludes consideration of amendments. Thank you very much. I now propose that we formally move to a vote on the draft resolution as amended. With those in favor of adopting the draft resolution as amended, please raise their voting cards. Thank you, and the vote seems clear. With those opposed, please raise your voting cards. And there are none, and those abstentions. The draft resolution as amended is adopted. Congratulations, Mr. Klimke. I can now announce that the final draft resolution on our agenda, entitled "The Need to Equip Passenger Aircraft with Additional Technical Means for Monitoring Conditions on Board in Real Time," must be considered in the plenary session this afternoon. We will now move to the election of committee officers. Nominations closed at 9. The International Secretariat informs me that the following nominations have been received in the table office: for Chair, Mr. Roger Wicker of the United States; for Vice Chair, Mr. Stefan Cruznieri of Belgium and Mr. Guglielmo Picci of Italy; and for Rapporteur, Ms. Sederfelt of Sweden. As the position of Chair is not considered, I declare the nominee for Chair, Mr. Roger Wicker of the United States, to be elected by acclamation in accordance with Rule 36(5). Likewise, as the position of Rapporteur is not contested, I declare the nominee for that position, Ms. Sederfelt of Sweden, to be elected by acclamation in accordance with Rule 35(6). The position of Vice Chair is contested, so we will have an election. For the conduct of the election, I will hand over to the International Secretariat. I have the handling of the election. And I have appointed as tellers the following: Ms. Barnett of Germany, Baroness Hilton of the United Kingdom, and Mr. Abe of Switzerland, to conduct the election and the counting of votes. And before we proceed, our distinguished Vice Chair, Mr. Azay Guliev, has asked for a moment to speak to the members of the committee. Azay, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, dear colleagues. Since this is my last meeting in the capacity of the Vice Chair of such an important committee, I'd like to sincerely thank all of you for your support and understanding during my tenure. The confidence and trust that you kindly entrusted me is very much appreciated. This has been a strong reminder for me to be guided by the common interest of our organization. I'd like to assure you of my readiness to continue to support our organization, OEC and its Parliamentary Assembly, with equal determination. I will remain to be a staunch believer in dialogue and cooperation. I am looking very much to working with all of you towards attainment of our shared goals and objectives. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, dear colleagues.
All right, I think we can do this election expeditiously, and everyone will have a chance to vote. As the position of Vice Chair is contested, we will have an election. I remind you that the candidates are Mr. Stefan Cruznieri of Belgium and Mr. Guglielmo Picci of Italy. And I now recognize Ms. Bhatti of the Secretariat for explicit directions.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Ballot papers have been prepared for the election. To vote, please place a cross by the name of your preferred candidate. According to Rule 36(5), a majority of votes cast is required for a candidate to be elected. In the event of a tie, the issue shall be decided by lot. Please come to the podium to collect your ballot paper. You must have your voting card with you and show your blue badge. And the committee will suspend while the votes are counted and will then resume for the results to be announced. The result will also be announced in the plenary session. So if you could come forward now. Thank you.
The ballots are to my right, at the far end of the table. Thank you. Let's vote quickly. Isaiah.